The president had been silent 3 days. His lawyers wanted it that way. But the political damage was rising much too fast. Today, drawn and bleary-eyed, Mr. Clinton joined the battle to save his presidency.
But I want to say one thing to the American people. I want you to listen to me. I'm going to say this again. I did not have sexual relations with that woman, Miss Lewinsky. I never told anybody to lie, not a single time, never. These allegations are false, and I need to go back to work for the American people.
Indeed, I did have a relationship with Miss Lewinsky that was not appropriate. In fact, it was wrong. It constituted a critical lapse in judgment and a personal failure on my part for which I am solely and completely responsible. I misled people, including even my wife. I deeply regret that.
That's where the 90s took us.
I believe that marriage is between a man and a woman. But I also detest the sort of bashing and vilifying of gays and lesbians because I think it's unduly divisive.
The fact of the matter is, we've gone from there all the way up to saying, under the leadership of Senator Thurmond, and I'd like to suggest that I take some small credit for it myself as well, and others, the presiding officer, that there's now a death penalty. And we passed it a couple years ago. If you are a major drug dealer involved in the trafficking of drugs and murder results in your activities, you go to death.
Senator, I'm sure that you would agree that your service in the Senate up to this point has not reflected any particular concern for the larger contributors.
Well, the fortunate thing is I didn't have many larger contributors, and the only reason, see, I went to the big guys for the money. I was ready to prostitute myself in the manner in which I talk about it, but what happened was they said, come back when you're 40, son.
I will give you $1 million to your favorite charity, paid for by Trump, if you take the test and it shows you're an Indian.
I am not a tribal citizen. I had a good conversation last week with Chief Baker, who is chief of the Cherokee tribes, and I told Chief Baker that I am sorry that I extended confusion about tribal citizenship and tribal sovereignty.
So, Senator, why did you list yourself as an American Indian on this Texas bar application?
When I was growing up in Oklahoma, I learned about my family the same way most people do. My brothers and I learned from our mom and our dad and our brothers and our sisters, and those were our family stories. But that said, there really is an important distinction of tribal citizenship.
So, on the issue of race, I couldn't agree more that this is an issue that is still not being talked about truthfully and honestly. There is not a black man I know, be he a relative, a friend, or a coworker, who has not been the subject of some form of profiling or discrimination. Growing up, my sister and I had to deal with the neighbor who told us her parents couldn't play with us because we were black. And I will say also that in this campaign, we've also heard, and I'm going to now direct this at Vice President Biden, I do not believe you are a racist. And I agree with you when you commit yourself to the importance of finding common ground. But I also believe, and it's personal, and I was actually it was hurtful to hear you talk about the reputations of two United States senators who built their reputations and career on the segregation of race in this country. And it was not only that, but you also worked with them to oppose busing. And, you know, there was a little girl in California who was part of the second class to integrate her public schools. And she was bused to school every day. And that little girl was me. So I will tell you that on this subject, it cannot be an intellectual debate among Democrats. We have to take it seriously. We have to act swiftly. As Attorney General of California, I was very proud to put in place a requirement that all my special agents would wear body cameras and keep those cameras on.
With Senator Harris confronting Vice President Biden at the last debate, you called it a, quote, false accusation that Joe Biden is a racist. What's your response?
I want to bring the conversation back to the broken criminal justice system that is disproportionately negatively impacting black and brown people all across this country today. Now, Senator Harris says she's proud of her record as a prosecutor and that she'll be a prosecutor president, but I'm deeply concerned about this record. There are too many examples to cite, but she put over 1,500 people in jail for marijuana violations and then laughed about it when she was asked if she ever smoked marijuana. She blocked evidence. She blocked evidence that would have freed an innocent man from death row until the courts forced her to do so. She kept people in prison beyond their sentences to use them as cheap labor for the state of California. And she fought to keep cash bail system in place that impacts poor people in the worst kind of way.
Kamala Harris and Cory Booker, and the race card was pulled on Nancy Pelosi by AOC. The Democrats want a return to civility. Let's go to the videotape, shall we? The stench of fascism is in the air. 1964, California Democrat Governor Pat Brown, when Barry Goldwater accepted the Republican nomination. I am scared that if Ronald Reagan gets into office, we're going to see more of the Ku Klux Klan and a resurgence of the Nazi Party. 1980, Coretta Scott King. Ronald Reagan is trying to replace the Bill of Rights with fascist precepts lifted verbatim from Mein Kampf. 1983, William Clay Sr., Democrat from Missouri. I believe George H.W. Bush is a racist for many, many reasons. He's a mean-spirited man who has no care or concern about what happens to the African-American community. I truly believe that. 1992, Representative Maxine Waters, Democrat from California. It's not S-word or N-word anymore. It's not S-word, a slur for Latinos, or N-word, you know what that is, anymore. Republicans say, let's cut taxes. 1994, Charlie Rango, Democrat, New York. The new Republican-controlled House is like the Duma and the Reichstag, referring to the legislature set up by Tsar Nicholas II of Russia and the parliament of the German Weimar Republic that brought Hitler to power. 1995, Representative John Dingell, Democrat, Michigan. The GOP is coming for our children. They're coming for the poor, the sick, the elderly, and the disabled. 1995, Representative John Lewis, Democrat, Georgia. We are in danger. The extreme right wing has seized the government, so look out. The right-wing media, the FBI, they are targeting our leadership. 2001, Reverend Jesse Jackson. Democrats versus Republicans is a struggle between good and evil, and we're the good. 2005, Governor Howard Dean, chair of the DNC. George W. Bush has improved on the techniques used by the Nazi and the communist propaganda machines. 2006, George Soros. The Republican Party would have the American flag and the swastika flying side by side. 2006, Julian Bond, chairman NAACP. The House of Representatives has been run like a plantation. And you know what I'm talking about. 2006, Hillary Clinton. Mitt Romney's gonna put y'all back in chains. 2012, Vice President Joe Biden to a predominantly black audience about Mitt Romney's refusal to push for further regulation on Wall Street. Gonna put y'all back in chains.